Hi, Dave. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you in real time due to a prior engagement. However, through the magic of a virtual platform, I am able, with the technical assistance of Ina, thank you, Ina, to record my comments to be played during this auspicious occasion, honoring you with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Over the course of many years, I have come to know you and your exemplary achievements as a scholar, author, editor, lecturer, mentor, historian, and pioneer in the field of psychohistory. Your achievements can fill many pages, but I want to highlight a few. As professor at SUNY Rockland County Community College for over 40 years, plus many, many years of prior teaching at other academic venues, you introduce students to not just history, but psychohistory. You achieved Professor Emeritus status as recognition for your scholarship and dedication to teaching. As a pioneer in the field of psychohistory, you served as editor to the Journal of Psychohistory from 1979 to 1987. You continue your connection with this journal as a contributing editor, as well as a frequent essayist. You have served on the editorial board of Clio's Psyche, as well as written innumerable essays for this publication. Additionally, you have presented groundbreaking papers at various psychohistory conferences. You are the author of the monumentally researched study, The Suicidal Embrace, Hitler, the Allies, and the Origins of the Second World War, 2003, and a fourth edition that came out in 2021. You edited a wonderful volume of poetry, Wounded Centuries. Over the last several years, I have gotten to know you as the co-author of our book of essays, Genres of the Imagination. Our work together has spanned topics of mutual interest, from jazz to film noir, to psychoanalysis, to contemporary culture and politics. Our writing collaboration has been an education unto itself, asking us to question old methods and explore new possibilities. As we move forward, we are now engaged in writing a second volume of essays that have taken us to another level of research, analysis, and methodology. To conclude this oh so brief tribute to you, Dave, I feel most honored to know you as not only someone of great academic integrity, but as my colleague and friend. Keep on keeping on, new work, new ideas, new worlds to explore.
Thank you to the Psychohistory Forum, to the Leadership Committee for this honor. It is very meaningful to me. A lifetime of work in the field means a lifetime of friendships and conversations of all kinds with students, colleagues, friends, rivals, people who have been rejecting psychohistory and then come around to it at various venues, including coffee at the IPA, forum meetings, etc., etc. Mostly, I want to thank the honor of being honored with three colleagues whom I have admired and respected for all these years, and whose work I have tried to and have integrated into my own writing. So thank you to them. Thank you to the forum. Thank you, Paul. And thank you for everybody being here. It's so nice to see so many people I haven't seen in so long. I hope we continue on this road for as long as it lasts.
Alan Elms had an unusual background for a celebrated professor. Born in 1938, he spent most of his first 4 years literally in a log cabin in rural Arkansas. Both of his parents were intelligent and readers, as Alan was, but had only 8th grade educations. Beginning in 1956, Allen attended Penn State with a National Merit Scholarship. Penn State's psychology department was dominated by the behavioral psychology of B.F. Skinner, but Allen was intrigued by what he learned about psychoanalysis, in part by reading Freud on his own. Allen wrote scathing satires in the literary magazine of the university's administration and almost got expelled, but graduated summa cum laude. Supported by a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, he went to Yale to study for a PhD in psychology, with an emphasis on social and personality psychology. While Allen was at Yale, Stanley Milgram carried out what is probably the most famous experiment in the history of psychology on the topic of obedience to authority. The setup is that one group of people were told that another group of people were learning tasks, and they, the first group, should give electrical shocks when the learners made mistakes. The first group was told it was a study of how effective shocks would be in learning, but actually it was a study of whether the first group would actually follow orders to give painful shocks. Of course, the people who were supposed to be learning did not receive any shocks, but they acted as they did, sometimes screaming in pain. The outcome of the study was that many of the first group, the actual subjects of the experiment, continued to give what they thought were intense shocks. Who was it that told the subjects they were expected to administer these shocks? Allen, as a research assistant to Milgram, was one of the people giving these instructions, and he also helped design the experiment. Milgram's conclusion was that many people follow authorities even when they believe they're harming others. The experiment had great influence because of its relevance to the behavior of the Germans, who carried out the malignant orders of the authorities during the Nazi era. After 3 years on the faculty of Southern Methodist University, Allen began in 1967 at the University of California, Davis, where he stayed until transferring to the status of Professor Emeritus in 2002. Much as he challenged the administration at Penn State, Allen published a widely read paper in 1975, The Crisis of Confidence in Social Psychology, in which he made sharp criticisms of the field of social psychology. Many in the field turned against him, but others with similar dissatisfactions allied with him.
Oh, good. Okay. So maybe I don't even need to do it.
Excuse me, somebody should mute herself, please. Many in the field turned against him, but others with similar dissatisfactions allied with him, including Ray Carlson and Sylvan Tompkins, who invited him to be one of the original members of the Society for Personology. It was at the annual meetings of the Society that I got to know Allen well. I'll make just one personal observation. He was the most incisive reader of many of my writings. He made acute comments that bothered me at first because I didn't really enjoy being criticized. But almost always I ended up seeing the point, and my writings benefited substantially from his feedback. All along, Allen's interest in psychobiography had been fermenting. It came out first in print in his book Personality and Politics in 1976, in which he included sections looking at political figures such as Wilson, Nixon, and Kissinger. For the rest of his career, psychobiography was his central interest, and he became a towering figure in the field. His 1994 book, which you may be able to see behind me, Uncovering Lives, The Uneasy Alliance of Biography and Psychology, argues that biography is empty if it doesn't utilize psychology. And with psychology, of what use is it if it can't illuminate biographies? Allen told me in a conversation about a year ago that he considers the book to be his proudest achievement. Another signal achievement is that he was the mentor of Todd Schultz, who has become arguably the foremost psychobiographer in the generation after Allen's. What strikes me the most about Allen's work is that he takes on unusual, unique topics. I mentioned 3 in my short write-up for this meeting, and I have time to mention just 2 more. Alan was mesmerized, as many of us were, by Robert Lindner's book, The 50-Minute Hour, in which Lindner describes therapy cases. The most dramatic is about a patient who has an elaborate fantasy about being a powerful figure in another world. Through painstaking research, Alan, following up on a hint he had read, described who the patient was and wrote about him. Alan revealed that a man named Paul Linebarger was Lindner's former patient. Linebarger, under the pen name Cordwainer Smith, drew on those fantasies after he no longer believed in them and became a celebrated writer of science fiction. And my second and last example, a famous psychologist, Gordon Allport, early in his career had a meeting with Sigmund Freud. Allport often told the story of that encounter. Searching for something to say when faced with the famous Freud, Allport mentioned to him that on the tram coming over, he'd seen a little boy who was obsessive, uncomfortable with dirt, and afraid of a dirty man on the tram. Freud asked him, "And was that little boy you?" Too bad I can't do a Viennese accent. Allport used the account as an illustration of how rash and wrong Freud and psychoanalysis are for thinking they can plunge into someone's personality. Alan, examining Allport's life and personality, pointed out how accurately Freud had seen into Allport. The anecdote, said Alan, didn't show Freud's wrong-headedness, but instead revealed his insight and his attunement to the unconscious.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for honoring my father. And I'm sorry he can't be here today. However, growing up with him, I'm very familiar with his research, and I will mention about Milgram that I grew up knowing about Milgram, and it wasn't until my Psych 101 class at Berkeley as an undergrad that I understood how important it was. And they showed the video, and I was like, oh, that's my dad. Yeah. And you know, he was a young man. He was 24 at the time, and a doctoral student, and they didn't expect the results that they got. And you know, the joke is always they were shocked by the results. Yeah. So, in any case, I currently teach business ethics at American University, and I use the video and the material regularly, and the students are really interested. But so I said to Jim that I wanted to talk my favorite piece that my father has written, and again, it's in the Uneasy Alliances book, and it's about L. Frank Baum. And this is just to tell you something about my father, apart from his academic achievements. But he writes, at an age when my daughters were old enough for chapter books, but still young enough to be to enjoy being read to, I read them in the first Oz book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. They loved it, so I read them the second Oz book, Marvelous Land of Oz. After that, they went on to read Baum's other 12 Oz books by themselves. And he goes on to say that he had read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz when he was 10, and then rereading it as an adult, thought more about it. And that instigated his research on L. Frank Baum. And I want to say something about the methodology of psychobiography, because that led him into getting into the Wizard of Oz Club, which we went to in Yosemite, and fantastic place to go to a conference, right? But in any case, what he says is, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, because as those of you who are familiar with my father's writing, he's a great writer. fantastic writer. I think, Jim, you'll agree. But what he says is fan clubs and fan conventions can be excellent sources of information about a psychobiographical subject. People who have been enthusiastically reading and rereading an author's work, who collect the books, who read, sometimes write, et cetera, can tell a psychobiographer a lot, not only about the author and the works, but about where else to look and who else to ask. And I think that's one of my father's huge contributions, is to say, you know, you really need to rely on a variety of sources. You need to talk to the people who know or who knew, or the family, etc., to really try to understand who people were and why they were writing about what they were writing about. And L. Frank Baum, in particular, his wife's mother was a suffragette, and he was really interested in women and women's rights. And if you think about Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, you know, she's saving all the guys. And that goes on throughout the novels. So, and my father makes that point, that the women in The Wizard of Oz books, and there are 14 of them, it's always the women who are saving the guys. And I'm not saying that negatively. I'm just saying it as he was someone who, at the time, and it was early on, was really interested in that. So I think that particular chapter that he wrote is important to me. Again, in part because my sister and I helped him with it. So I recommend reading it, and in the chapter, he suggests that you read, in particular, The Land of Oz, because there's a transformation going on. So I'll stop there, because this is a little, it's a lot personal to me. But thank you all for honoring him.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Paul, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about Robert J. Lifton. In the limited time I have been given to speak, I can't possibly do justice to the many contributions he has made to our field over the last 70 plus years. But I'll try to touch on some of the highlights. One of the things I find most remarkable and admirable about Dr. Lifton is how clear and consistent his moral and political stance has remained throughout his work. In the preface to his memoir, Witness to an Extreme Century, published in 2014, he expresses simply and elegantly the basis of his moral and political positions. To quote, "I've been moved by the victimized people I encountered and have spoken out publicly against the forces responsible for their suffering. That identification with survivors of cruel events has in fact been a major source of my social activism. After what I had heard and seen, it became quite natural, indeed urgent, for me to take stands against mind control, nuclear weapons, American war making, and Nazi-like cruelty and genocide."
Oh, you got Peru, Josephine?
Yeah, because it's my computer.
Hello?
What are you doing?
Robert affirms the principle that if one witnesses cruelty, violence, injustice, or evil being displayed by an individual or group toward others, there should be a moral imperative to speak out, make public, and bear witness to its existence, and perhaps to do something about it. As he puts it, quote, "I felt that I had gained special knowledge of the impact of these abuses, which could inform my witness, and I was able to make use of my unusual vantage point to become an advocate for peaceful paths to justice and political decency. Another aspect of Robert's moral integrity is the manner in which he has remained faithful to his principles of the politics that follow from them, despite pressures and temptations to do otherwise. He has had offers to collaborate with those in power. In 1962, he was approached by either the CIA or military intelligence with an offer to aid them by using his knowledge about thought reform and brainwashing techniques, which he declined. A major thread throughout his work has been his engagement with what he names totalism, an all-encompassing system of beliefs involving a passionate attachment to an ideology, along with a desire to battle against ideas or people that are seen as not sharing this belief system. As he says concerning the centrality of this engagement, quote, "My thought reform study," which was his first major research project, "became a leitmotif for all of my work. Everything I've done since connects somehow with totalism and mind manipulation, and all too frequently with expressions of apocalypticism." The 5 major events that he has studied: Chinese thought reform, the effects of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Vietnam War, the behavior of Nazi doctors, and the study of the Japanese cult Aum Shinrikyo, all followed this leitmotif. For Maoist China, the goal was to transform the individual by means of mind control, breaking down previous beliefs and loyalties, and instilling in their place a loyalty to the idealized leader, Mao, and the belief system of his version of communism. With Hiroshima and atomic weapons, Lifton sees the powerful belief system of what he calls nuclearism, the worshipful attitude toward the bomb, paired with the magical belief that the bomb's power will save us, as crucial to understanding our relationship to nuclear weapons. Nazi ideology, in addition to creating the Holocaust, was powerful enough to convert physicians from healers to killers. In Vietnam, the totalistic fanaticism of our Cold Warrior leadership led us into the atrocity-producing situations of that war. In addition to the Vietnam War, this Cold War ideology has also given us the excesses of McCarthyism, the CIA ventures into developing techniques of mind control, and fueled the creation of a massive nuclear arsenal capable of destroying the world. The Aum Shinrikyo cult, along with other fundamentalist groups, which share a wish for the arrival of the apocalypse that will clear the way for a utopian paradise, are examples of totalistic worldviews, which make use of manipulating and controlling the minds of their members. Opposition to the oppressiveness of totalistic ideology and the harm that can follow from a commitment to it has always informed his thinking about totalism. His concept of proteanism is a description of a way of relating to the world that is in opposition to totalistic fundamentalism. In 1966, Robert, together with Eric Erickson, Kenneth Keniston, Bruce Maslish, and Philip Reif, started the Wellfleet Psychohistory group. Robert convened and graciously hosted the yearly meetings of this growing group at his home in the dunes of the Cape for 50 years, ending in 2015. Robert invited me to attend in 2006, and I had the privilege of participating for 10 years. I will be forever grateful to Robert for giving me the opportunity to experience these wonderful gatherings. Here's a partial list of the people who attended regularly, semi-regularly, or who made cameo appearances, starting with the regulars in alphabetical order. Peter Balakian, Mary Catherine Bateson, Norman Birnbaum, Margaret Brenman Gibson, Kathy Carruth, Jim Carroll, Wendy Doninger, Daniel Ellsberg, Kai Erickson, Larry Friedman, Carol Gilligan, Jim Gilligan, Todd Gitlin, Judith Herman, Robert Holt, Jim Jones, Peter Kuznick, Betty Jean Lifton, where are we? Norman Mailer, Carl Mayer, Michael Miller, Charles Strozier, and Bessel van de Kolk. Guest participants included Dan Berrigan, Noam Chomsky, Robert Coles, Harvey Cox, David Dellinger, Richard Falk, Jane Fonda, Peter Gay, Raoul Hilberg, Michael Kazin, Robert Kuttner, Lynn Layton, Jill Lepore, Naomi Oreskes, Philip Reif, David Reisman, Jonathan Schell, Martin Sherwin, Sherry Turkle, Lawrence Wright, and Howard Zinn. In addition to his scholarship, which includes at least 27 books, along with numerous papers and articles, and his numerous acts of political activism, he has taken on the mantle of being a public intellectual who seeks to get us to join him in bearing witness to the suffering caused by the numerous trauma-producing events we have all lived through. In this, he engages with the essence of the psychohistorical project of understanding the psychological motivations that drive so much of our behavior.
I appreciate this award and appreciate particularly your exploration through the elements of my work in so carefully recording my own sense of things. I'll say just a few words, really just a few phrases that I want to throw out to you on this occasion, which perhaps are worth thinking about. Let me say first that psychohistory is not a movement, it's a method. And it's important that we understand that, and method is the best word. Methodology sounds a little bit mystifying. Method is a way to get at information and approaches that we need. And of course, it really means that history is central to the formation of the self. It's not somewhere out there. It's in there, inside of us. It's also true that in our work, it's important that we seek experience, not depend too much on speculation, but interviews are still an underappreciated. It's sad to say this at this point in our work, but I don't think the interview method, which is such a beautiful method, is sufficiently made use of. And of course, it must be modified in ways I won't go into, but it still serves as no other method can. We're never neutral, as David made clear in his rendering of my own approach. There's always a moral and political dimension to our psychohistorical approaches, and it's important that we follow up on that witness and that revelation that we might be able to make. It's also true that we need professional rigor. The better our work is, the more accurately attuned it is to our data and to a willingness to change our minds when our data take us to places that we hadn't expected, the better the more powerful the political and moral influence. Rigor brings about political efficacy. And finally, I'd say something I know people in this room are aware of. there's a deep satisfaction to using this method. How can history be outside of our formation? We can say this, we can do it in systematic ways, and we can have staying power in continuing with this satisfying enterprise. Thanks again for this award, which I deeply appreciate.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. I'm honored to be here, Paul, and I thank you and the Psychohistory Forum and Ken Fuchsman. I don't know if Peter's been able to get on, but he's been trying. We've been texting a little bit behind the scenes.
He's on it.
Okay, great. Hi, Pete. So Peter J. Loewenberg is Professor of History Emeritus, UCLA, Dean and Director of the Training School Emeritus, Southern California Psychoanalytic Institute and New Center for Psychoanalysis, Board International Psychoanalytic Association, 2015 to 2019, Chair International Psychoanalytic Association, China Committee, 2007 to 2013. After receiving rigorous training in the disciplines of history and psychoanalysis, Peter has provided psychohistory with firm foundations in both fields. Interdisciplinary and comparative in approach, he has grounded psychohistory in the clinical and theoretical perspectives of classical and contemporary psychoanalysis. For most of his academic career, Peter taught at UCLA, promoting psychohistorical approaches to historiography and simultaneously advancing the penetration of psychoanalysis locally in Los Angeles, nationally and internationally, most recently in China. Having published 2 major articles in its important journal, the American Historical Review in 1971, he legitimized the methodology and served as a model for serious scholarship in the emerging field. His 2 books, Decoding the Past, published in 1983, and Fantasy and Reality in History, published in 1995, have become foundational texts for the field. Peter helped to pass the Research Psychoanalyst Law in California in 1977, permitting full psychoanalytic training to academics in the humanities and social sciences. The New Center for Psychoanalysis is now the premier training center for this cohort of researchers in America. His personal and analytic style blend a coherent and unsentimental form of humanism, one that rejoices in the uniqueness of personalities, that is respectful of privacy, difference, and otherness, and that sees the potential for growth and deepening awareness of the self. He is consistently empathic to those oppressed by history and tough-minded and realistic about those who use hatred, violence, and ideology to oppress others. As a distinguished member of the psychohistorical avant-garde, Peter Loewenberg is richly deserving of this Lifetime Achievement Award. Let me say in conclusion that he's my buddy and my fellow traveler, even though I prefer the expression in French, my compagnon de route. Thank you.
A Lifetime Career Award, which I think has I hope, with the rest of you, has a promising future. I think this award is symbolic of 2 truths. One of them is that human beings do have an unconscious, which is stubbornly denied by the world, but it leaves us with cues that may be studied and interpreted and it provides coherence to the motives of the personality. The other point I would make about our subsection of the history profession is that thorough training in both disciplines, your social science discipline, should it be political science or sociology, history, or medicine, thorough training in both the outside social science and psychodynamics is necessary. Don't be a dilettante. In order to convey conviction, you really have to master both fields, and it's worth the time and energy and work. And I look forward to a very promising future for psychohistory and for this award. Thank you, Paul.